In the shadow of oppressive institutions, where the interests of military and industry intertwine, lies the military-industrial complex, a vast and omnipresent network driven by profit and power. This complex, a manifestation of our dystopian reality, perpetuates a cycle of violence and consumption. We begin by examining this entity, using dialectical rhetoric, deconstruction, and the lens of biopower to expose its pervasive influence and the subtle chains it forges around us. The military-industrial complex is not just a concept, but a reality that shapes global politics, economies, and societies. Originating in the post-World War II era, it represents the intertwined relationship between a nation's military and the defense industry that supplies it. This alliance influences policies and actions in ways that prioritize military might and industrial gain over human welfare and ethical considerations. As we unravel the threads of this complex, we delve into its historical roots, its present-day manifestations, and its future implications. Part 1. Deconstruction and Hyperreality. To deconstruct, we must first engage in dialogue. The military-industrial complex, born of relentless neoliberal ambitions, fuels a ceaseless consumer culture. This system thrives on the endless churn of production and conflict, perpetuating wars that devastate lives and enrich a select few. Drawing from Derrida's deconstruction, we see a world constructed on layers of meaning, each obscuring the reality of the damage it causes. Baudrillard's Hyperreality shows us a world where simulations replace reality, where the spectacle of war becomes just another commodity. The term military-industrial complex was popularized by President Dwight D. Eisenhower in his 1961 farewell address, warning of the potential for misplaced power. Since then, this concept has evolved into a cornerstone of critical analysis in understanding modern geopolitics and economic strategies. Derrida's deconstruction allows us to peel back the layers of this complex, revealing the inherent contradictions and concealed motives. In Baudrillard's notion of hyperreality, the military-industrial complex has perfected the art of creating simulations that blur the lines between the real and the fictional. War is no longer just a tragic event. It is a carefully constructed spectacle that serves to justify continued military expenditure and intervention. The public is fed a steady diet of dramatized conflict through media, desensitizing them to the actual human cost and conditioning them to accept perpetual warfare as normal. Part 2. Identification and Critique. Within this bleak system, we must recognize the individuals ensnared in its machinery. Soldiers, workers, and civilians alike find themselves trapped in a complex web of economic and social constraints. Our critique targets the structure that sustains the military-industrial complex, not the people unwittingly entangled in its web. Derrida's reflections remind us that these structures distance us from true freedom, chaining us to roles and narratives that serve the powerful. By identifying these dynamics, we lay the groundwork for genuine critique and transformation. At the heart of the military-industrial complex are the individuals whose lives are intertwined with its operations. Soldiers who fight on the front lines, workers who build the machinery of war, and civilians who bear the brunt of conflicts. All are caught in a system that exploits their labor and sacrifices them. These individuals often have little control over the danger and the larger forces that shape their destinies. Our critique must differentiate between the people and the structures. It is the latter, the policies, economic incentives, and power dynamics that perpetuate the cycle of violence and exploitation. By understanding how these structures operate, we can begin to envision ways to dismantle them and create more just alternatives. Part 3. Biopower and control. Michel Foucault's concept of biopower reveals how the state exerts control over bodies and populations. The military-industrial complex, through its entanglement with neoliberalism, extends this control, regulating life itself. From surveillance technologies to propaganda, the state's reach infiltrates every aspect of our existence, shaping behaviors and norms. This biopower ensures the perpetuation of a system that prioritizes profit over human life, maintaining the status quo through subtle and pervasive means. Foucault's idea of biopower highlights the ways in which modern states manage and control populations. The military-industrial complex is a prime example of biopower in action. It extends its influence through technologies of surveillance, mechanisms of discipline, and strategies of regulation. This complex not only wields physical power, but also shapes the very fabric of society, dictating norms and expectations. Surveillance technologies developed within this complex are deployed both domestically and internationally. From drones patrolling foreign skies to sophisticated monitoring systems tracking citizens at home. The reach of biopower is vast. Propaganda further entrenches this control, creating narratives that justify militaristic policies and suppress dissent. Part 4. Modern instances of war crimes. Today, the impacts of this complex are evident in places like Palestine and Yemen. In Palestine, homes are demolished, families are torn apart, and lives are lost under the relentless weight of occupation. In Yemen, a humanitarian crisis unfolds with every airstrike, every blockade, leaving countless innocent lives in ruins. These conflicts, driven by geopolitical and economic interests, exemplify the destructive reach of the military-industrial complex. War crimes, often ignored by mainstream discourse, cry out for justice and recognition. By bearing witness to these tragedies, we confront the system that enables such atrocities. The ongoing conflicts in Palestine and Yemen starkly illustrate the devastating effects of the military-industrial complex. In Palestine, the Israeli occupation leads to daily violence and systemic oppression. The military-industrial complex supports this through the supply of weapons and technology, facilitating the destruction and suffering that characterizes life in the occupied territories. In Yemen, the complex's influence is seen in the form of foreign military interventions and blockades that exacerbate the humanitarian crisis. Airstrikes, often carried out with weapons supplied by major arms manufacturers, lead to civilian casualties and widespread devastation. These actions constitute war crimes, yet they are constantly and frequently overlooked or justified in the name of geopolitical strategy. Part 5. The global reach and impact. The military-industrial complex is not confined to specific regions. Its influence is global, from the corridors of power in Washington to the factories in distant lands. Its reach extends across borders. Nations engage in an arms race, stockpiling weapons that promise security but deliver only instability. Economic policies are shaped to favor military expenditures, diverting resources from education, healthcare, and social welfare. This global entanglement of interests perpetuates a cycle of dependency and conflict, with far-reaching consequences for humanity and the planet. Furthermore, the production and export of arms creates dependency among nations, fueling conflicts and perpetuating cycles of violence. The complex benefits from instability, as it creates a continual demand for weapons and military services. This entanglement of economic and military interests ensures that the complex's influence remains pervasive and persistent. Part 6. The role of media and propaganda. The media plays a crucial role in maintaining the status quo, often acting as a mouthpiece for the military-industrial complex. News outlets driven by corporate interests frame narratives that normalize violence and dehumanize the other. Propaganda seeps into our consciousness, shaping perceptions and justifying endless conflict. Baudrillard's Hyperreality reveals a world where these simulations of war and conflict replace our understanding of reality, creating a distorted view that sustains militarism and consumerism. Media literacy becomes a tool of resistance, empowering us to question and challenge the stories we are fed. Media and propaganda are powerful tools used by the military-industrial complex to shape public opinion and justify military actions. News outlets, often influenced by corporate interests, present biased narratives that normalize violence and dehumanize perceived enemies. This framing supports the complex's goals, promoting militarism and suppressing dissent. Baudrillard's concept of hyperreality is particularly relevant here. The media's portrayal of war often bears little resemblance to the actual experiences of those affected. Instead, it creates a simulation that replaces reality, making war seem distant and sanitized. This distortion supports the ongoing cycle of conflict and consumerism. To counteract this, media literacy is essential. By critically analyzing media messages and understanding the underlying agendas, individuals can resist the pervasive influence of propaganda. Media literacy empowers people to question the narratives they are presented with and seek out alternative perspectives. Part 7. Juxtaposition and Resistance. Against this backdrop, we see the potential for art and cultural praxis to challenge prevailing norms. Art, in its myriad forms, serves as a medium of resistance, offering alternative visions and fostering dialogue. Murals on the walls of occupied territories, poems written in the shadows of bomb blasts, films that depict the human cost of conflict, each act of creation becomes a defiant gesture. By embracing creative expression, we can question and resist the consumerist and militaristic narratives that dominate, opening spaces for new possibilities and solidarities. Art and cultural praxis offer powerful means of resistance against the military-industrial complex. Through various forms of creative expression, individuals and communities can challenge prevailing norms and present alternative visions. Music, created in occupied territories, and art created amid conflict, including films depicting the human cost of war in its reality, all serve as defiant gestures against oppression. These acts of creation foster dialogue and offer new ways of understanding and resisting the consumeristic and militaristic narratives that dominate our societies. Art becomes a space for envisioning alternative futures and building solidarities based on shared values of justice and peace. Part 8. Cultural Praxis and Social Norms. Art as cultural praxis helps us to reshape our reality. It allows us to imagine communities built on cooperation rather than competition, where empathy replaces exploitation. Through theater, music, and visual arts, we explore themes of justice, peace, and collective well-being. Drawing on Sartre's existentialism, we find the freedom to create meaning in a world often defined by conflict and consumerism. This cultural resistance redefines social norms, fostering environments where alternative values can thrive and transformative change can take root. Cultural praxis, the practice of integrating cultural activities into social action and reflecting upon them, enables us to challenge and redefine social norms. Through various art forms, we can address themes of justice, peace, and well-being, offering a counter-narrative to the dominant ideologies posed by the military-industrial complex and consumerism. Sartre's existentialism once again teaches us that we have the power to create meaning in our own lives, even in the face of oppressive systems. All forms of amateur art become tools for social change, encouraging empathy and cooperation over competition and exploitation. By engaging with these creative practices, communities can envision and work towards a more just and equitable society. Cultural resistance thus becomes a powerful force for transformative change, helping to shift social norms and values towards a more humane and sustainable future. Part 9. The necessity of engaging in dialogue as praxis. Engaging in dialogue is not merely a theoretical exercise. It is praxis, a practical act of resistance and reconstruction. Through dialogue, we connect with others, share experiences, and build coalition. It is through these conversations that we uncover common ground and develop strategies for collective action. In resisting the military-industrial complex, dialogue and rhetoric becomes our most potent weapon, enabling us to dismantle harmful systems and construct new ones based on justice and equity. Dialogue is a crucial component of praxis, the process by which theory is enacted, embodied, or realized. It is through meaningful conversations that we can build connections, share experiences, and form coalitions. These interactions allow us to identify common goals and develop strategies for collective action against the military-industrial complex. By engaging in dialogue, we challenge the narratives imposed by oppressive systems and create spaces for new ideas and solutions. This practice of dialogue fosters understanding and solidarity, empowering individuals and communities to resist and dismantle harmful structures. As we communicate and collaborate, we lay the groundwork for constructing a more just and equitable society. Reflecting on the military-industrial complex, we strive not only to critique, but also to envision a better future. The Society for Dialectical Rhetoric invites you to join in this journey. Together, we can deconstruct harmful systems and promote dialogue, identification, critique, and juxtaposition to redefine our world. In the face of formidable challenges, our resilience and collective efforts can pave the way for a more just and peaceful existence. As we conclude our exploration of the military-industrial complex, it is essential to remember that our goal is to not merely criticize, but to inspire change and reshape rhetoric. The Society for Dialectical Rhetoric calls upon all of us to engage in the work of deconstructing harmful systems and fostering dialogue. Through identification, critique, and juxtaposition, we can challenge the status quo and envision a world grounded in justice and peace. In the face of immense power and influence of the military-industrial complex, our collective resilience and efforts are crucial. By coming together and taking action, we can create a future that prioritizes human dignity, equity, and sustainability. Let us embark on this journey with hope and determination, committed to building a better world for all.
To see something beautiful on the wall. So we started wondering who he was, why he was painting, why he was making this wall beautiful. Now European tourists come here to see Banksy's paintings and visit his hotel, but they don't care about the sacred land. They don't care about what the wall has done to us.